Yes, I know this one's a bit late, but it's mainly because I spent the majority of the Christmas period gathering enough materials to build a conveyor belt starting at my local pub and ending at my bed. So I was on my way to the cinema to watch Arrival. Very good movie, by the way. And as I was getting my ticket, I decided to kill some time and grab one of those booklets that informs me about what films I'll be butchering in the near future. Instead of using it as a canvas for me to practice freehand animating on, or to decorate the cage that I keep the GIMP in, I actually decided to read the motherfucker instead. To my horror, I found out that Rogue One's release date had been brought forward by 11 days, so I drove back at a speed that could only be matched by a coked up Velociraptor. This was in the name of retrieving some assets from the digital skip so they can be duplicated more times than your mum's phone number over the walls of a female prison. Before I get this shit rolling, I'm going to dust off the old disclaimer banner by saying there's a huge chance this review may contain spoilers. I won't reveal anything dramatic, but chances are I'll be dipping in and out of spoiler territory more times than I've dipped in and out of a pool filled with my own hate mail. First of all, yes, initially I too was pissed off that Rogue One didn't start with an opening crawl. I was so furious that I was going to begin this review with a hilarious one of my own, and it would have gone a little something like this. But the more I thought about it, the more I began to realise that the entire movie itself is an opening crawl, the one belonging to A New Hope to be exact. Honestly, read it after watching the movie and you'll see immediately that it summarises the events in Rogue One. The reason being is that the plot is basically explaining how the Rebel Alliance managed to get hold of the Death Star plans to hopefully exploit a weakness and destroy it. Questions like who built the Death Star and why does it have such a fatal weakness are also answered, and it slides into the next movie with the same amount of ease as a life-size C-3PO model would slide into your dad after I've became his chocolate starfish destroyer. If you go and watch Rogue One with the hope you'll end up watching a typical Star Wars film, you'll be very disappointed. This isn't about the whole bringing balance to the Force Jedi versus Sith narrative. There's actually no Jedi in this film whatsoever. Fuck, you don't even see a lightsaber until the final few minutes of the movie. Oh, and don't you fucking worry, we'll get to that bowl of sexual delight later. Anyway, the disappointment would continue because it doesn't really feel like a Star Wars film. The cinematography, pacing, flow, and overall style is completely different to the traditional methods of this franchise. But that's okay because what you do get is a fresh perspective of the familiar. Instead of the plot being focused on one person destined for greatness, princesses, generals, or the respective head honchos of the rebellion and empire, Rogue One's story is driven by the people on the ground, the foot soldiers, assassins, pilots, and the ones who simply got involved by accident or didn't even want anything to do with this shit. You know, the unsung heroes that actually made all of it possible. It also expands on the characteristics of the rebellion. No longer do they appear to be goody-goody and squeaky clean. Rogue One exposes their dark side, pun very intended. We see them torturing, betraying, and even murdering each other, which is good because in reality they'd need to get their hands filthier than a prostate examiner's index finger to achieve the shit that they need to. The acting is fine. The dialogue is a bit messy and unimaginative in places, which is why a robot voiced by Steve the Pirate from Dodgeball is the standout character. The effects blend in with the environment well, however there are two cast members from the original trilogy, I won't spoil who, that are completely CGI'd because of reasons that will become very apparent when you watch it. This didn't go down well with the hardcore fan base at all, but come on guys, we all know it would have been really fucking weird if these two characters weren't featured in the movie. Yes, the CGI quality is by no means perfect and the body movements look clunky, but the technology is young and it has to start somewhere. I mean, Christ, you should see some of the shit I was drawing when I was starting out. I'm of course kidding. That animation is perfect. Of course, the movie doesn't fail to remind you that you're watching a Star Wars film. Easter eggs and stormtroopers are everywhere. There's cameos dotted all over the place and there's a beautifully choreographed dogfight embedded in the mix as well. All very nostalgia pleasing, yes, but if anything, having Rogue One telling you every so often that you're watching a Star Wars movie occasionally disrupt immersion it works so hard to achieve. For what it's worth, they may as well have had subliminal reminders continuously flashing on screen with the same amount of subtlety and grace as a hammer blow to the foreskin. A Star Wars film composed by any other person than John Williams frankly is a crime, but because Rogue One drifted away from the usual MO we are used to from this franchise, I hope that we would get to hear a completely different new style of music in this one. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't expecting to hear a soundtrack loaded with death metal, though thinking about it that would have been awesome, but what I didn't want was Michael Giacchino to phone it in and try to replicate the style of someone much more experienced and talented than him at this stage of their respective careers. Unfortunately, that's what happened and we ended up with music that fitted some scenes about as well as a virgin anus would fit a BB-8 butt plug. Some aspects of the costume design is fucking awful, especially when it comes to the Empire's wardrobe. Most attempts to capture the look from the original trilogy, Rogue One takes place in between episodes 3 and 4 but significantly closer to A New Hope, fails completely. Some of them look like they hacked the holy fuck out of a tent, draped it over themselves, then stuck red and blue acid tabs on their breast. Others look like a failed attempt at cosplaying as Han Solo, but the worst outfits by far belong to the stormtroopers. Yes, I get the fact they've given them a beaten and weathered look to make the suits appear more battle tested, but I don't think making them seem like someone has thrown buckets of piss all over them was the best creative decision. Let's talk about Darth fucking Vader. Yes, he is in the movie, but not for very long. He is featured in 3 scenes, but they are all very compelling. The first one is where he is basically floating in what appears to be the Empire's idea of a jacuzzi. What's significant about this is he wasn't wearing his mask and suit. We haven't seen Vader this vulnerable since Empire, and it was a glimpse to remind you that under that, well, in this case not very well replicated suit, is a mentally and physically broken man who misses his wife and possibly his former self. In the second scene, the suit is on and he is already threatening and choking members of his staff, though it didn't feel the same. I don't know if James Earl Jones's voice was off or the dialogue, which wasn't Vader-like at all, ruined it, but either way it just felt like he couldn't be fucked to get out of his jacuzzi, so he sent the work experienced kid to deal with his politics. The final one was fucking gorgeous. So we are at the end of the movie. It's the penultimate scene and we are on a rebel ship that's being overrun by the Empire because our protagonist managed to transmit the Death Star plans to an orbiting rebel ship so they can copy and transmit it to every ally they have in the galaxy. A copy of the plans ends up in the hands of a few rebels who are trapped at one end of a corridor. Darkness suddenly befalls them and the tense silence is finally broken by... Fucking hell, I'm bad at that. The corridor illuminates with red, and while what happens between Vader and the other end of it is simply beautiful. He is butchering these people mercilessly. He is outnumbered and his enemies have blasters, but you can't help but feel that everyone in the vicinity, especially Vader, knew that the rebels hadn't got a fucking chance. As I watched what easily had to be the best scene I've witnessed in a Star Wars movie for a very long time, I couldn't work out who was enjoying it more, me or Vader. I found it as close as you can get to almost sexually arousing, and I could tell he clearly hasn't had this much fun since he murdered all those children in Revenge of the Sith. So yeah, the Force is strong with this one. Is it better than The Force Awakens? I need to see it a few more times before making such a decision, but it's certainly more interesting. It's a very welcome, refreshing change of pace, especially to a franchise that's starting to become more worn down than an Ewok's colon during a bestiality convention.